Thank you so much, Harpreet, for taking the time today and coming on the show to talk with me. I really appreciate it. Been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I've been wearing the Oura Ring. It's a sleep measuring ring that you're the CEO of the company, and I've been wearing it for a couple months now and really enjoying it as a product, making some changes with my sleep as well. So, I appreciate you coming on. I think the best place to get started is just by telling your story, from as early as you're willing to start to becoming the CEO of Oura, and kind of we'll get into what you've been doing since you've been there as well.
No, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Jake. Really, honestly, I think glad that you've had a ring, been trying it, and so I think I think a lot of your audience is into obviously health and better versions of themselves. So excited to be here. In terms of my story, I would say none of it was really planned. Most of it, by accident. But hopefully, I can help connect the dots in some logical order. I think, look, growing up, I was really into probably two things. I think one, into engineering and technology. My dad was an electrical engineer. My grandfather was an electrical engineer. I can still remember I probably got more excitement, when I was, man, trying to think now how old, probably like 9 years old, when like my dad, brought home a computer from work, and like the first thing I did was unscrew the lid and sort of look what's inside. So like I think I just always loved learning how things work and tinkering with the technology. I think as I grew up, I started actually getting really into sort of health and performance, and frankly because I was really bad athlete. I'm Sikh. I have a turban and a beard, and I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and in Bridgewater, New Jersey, and my dad worked at Bell Labs and AT&T and Lucent, and so pretty suburban-ish areas. And I look different, and so for me, fitting in was being good at sports. It wasn't cool to be into tech or a nerd, then. And luckily, I think that's changing at a younger and younger age, which is great. But I felt like, oh, in order to fit in, I had to be good at sports. And for me, I was 5'5", probably 120 pounds most of high school. And so for me, that was soccer as a sport. Obviously, football and basketball sort of probably would have been harder. But I just found, I felt like I had to work twice as hard to be half as good as everyone else on my team. And, I think that sort of frustration of, oh, why when I train this way, am I not getting the same results as someone else? Oh, why, frankly, like why can some of my friends, eat a bunch of candy, ice cream, hamburgers, smoke cigarettes and run a 5-minute mile and I can't. And so I think, in my quest to just learn how to be better, I started realizing so much about the human body, is unknown. And, when I got to college, I ended up going to the University of Michigan and ended up studying electrical engineering. I chose Michigan partly because not only did they have a great double E program, but they're one of the few schools that actually had a MEMS program. So MEMS is, microelectronic mechanical systems. But essentially, if you think about like sensor technology, like things like an accelerometer, things like optical sensors, those were some of the things that you get to work on design in MEMS. And I always felt like even at that age, that the future of technology and health is going to intersect, and we'll be able to understand the human body better. Long story short, I would say that was all, my interest and passion. But then, I was graduating, it was 2007, sort of financial boom. And it was like at the time, my sister was living in New York City, having grown up in New Jersey, you want to get to the other side of the tunnel. And it was like, oh, go work at Intel, or GE in, Louisville, Kentucky, or try to get a job and be cool and live in New York City. And so, at that time, I think it was a lot easier to get a job in sort of the finance sector or the consulting sector. And a lot of my friends were in the business school and doing that. And so I just, read a couple, the Vault Guide on accounting and, like audited a accounting class or two. And then, actually ended up getting a job on Wall Street at Morgan Stanley and their M&A Group, after college. And I think, in my first year, I worked really hard as an investment banker, ended up gaining like 50 pounds in my first year, about a pound a week. And frankly, it was the first time in my life I started experiencing insomnia. I'd come home from work 2, 3 a.m., be all wired and couldn't fall asleep, which is crazy, right? Because you're like sleep deprived and can't fall asleep. And so, I think that's where sort of my fascination and understanding of sleep started to happen. Like I was still eating decently healthy and, but just gaining a lot of weight and, started learning about links like, oh, wow, your leptin and your ghrelin levels, change when you're sleep deprived, essentially what controls your hunger and satiety, how full you feel. And so I think, the more I learned about that, the more I started realizing sleep made a huge impact on my health. I ended up staying at a hedge fund after Morgan Stanley, which was much more sustainable. Ended up losing all the weight. Ended up doing things like keto diet, intermittent fasting. So, probably 2009, I think, is when I was doing my first, ish diet, like reading the blogs like Lean Gains, out there for sure, Martin Burkhan, and like I think some of the early people into that movement, over 10 years ago. And so I think, my fascination with sort of just health always continued through my personal journeys. And, at the hedge fund, I covered the tech, media, and telecom sector for us, which meant a lot of time on hardware and spent a lot of time looking at the wearable space just because I, was always still fascinated and enthusiastic about it at heart as a consumer. And, I tried probably 7 to 10 wearables, and then, saw Oura Ring on a Kickstarter in 2015. I knew the advantages of some of the sensing and signal quality improvements on the finger versus things on the wrist, and also was a big believer in sleep. And so got the product probably sometime early 2016, and was honestly just the first wearable that I kept on for longer than 2 weeks in a row. I think everything else, I try them all, they'd end up in the junk drawer, and was really blown away. And I could measurably see when my sleep score is better, when my readiness score is better. I was getting that extra rep in the gym. I was getting that extra thing done on my to-do list at work. I was probably in a better mood. And so I think I experienced that, and totally by accident, one of the co-founders happened to be in New York City. Company started in Finland, and still majority of our employees are in Finland. That we have a big growing presence in the Bay Area now. And he was wearing an Oura t-shirt. I was in Whole Foods. He was in town for a conference for like a CES offshoot. I think it was called like CE New York or something like that. So he was in town for 2 days, and we're walking through Whole Foods, and my girlfriend sees this guy with an Oura t-shirt. She starts going and talking to him, and then he sees me later and sees that I have an Oura ring. And at this point, it was very, very early days. He's like, "That's the first Oura ring I've seen outside the office." And so that's sort of, I ended up investing in the company. I think, it was still, sort of dog days for hardware, and, sleep wasn't that popular yet. And, they're having sort of a hard time raising capital. I personally invested, and I helped raise the whole Series A and joined the board. And then I just started helping the company. And, a couple months into being on the board, I think the founders realized, and I realized I was having more fun working on Oura than I was, at my regular job, even though I love that too. And so I think, they asked me to join, and ended up joining as president. That was in May of 17. And I think, a little bit after a year, I got, promoted by the board to CEO. And we've grown a ton since, now have a team of over 200 people, and it's been a crazy, crazy journey. Hopefully that can help connect some of the dots that may not look like there's a pattern there, but there is some pattern there, I guess, underneath it all.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a super interesting story. There's a couple points actually that have significant overlap with on my end, and I can sympathize with the banking stint to start the career, and then also growing up in New Jersey. So it's pretty funny. But it sounds like when you first discovered Oura, you had a number. You were focused on the advantages that you could get from growing up playing sports.
Yeah.
You talked about like having to work twice as hard to be half as good. So you had this kind of idea that there was like, maybe some hacks available to you and you needed to find them. And then you go on and obviously you have this engineering mindset as well. And then you go on and you're in banking and you see the adverse impact on your health and kind of correlate that with the lack of sleep. And then you try on these wearables and Oura, and it all kind of clicks that sleep is, I don't know necessarily in what order, but it clicks that sleep is the missing component and you need to optimize. And Oura seems like a great way to do that. I guess when you were first trying different wearables, were they all in the early days, were they all focused on sleep, or a
No.
wide variety of things? And what separated Aura from you? You mentioned like the other ones didn't last more than a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. But First, got to ask a more important question. Where in New Jersey did you grow up?
Actually in Somerset County. So,
No, no way.
yeah,
Okay.
so I'm very familiar with Bridgewater.
Where this is hilarious. Where in Somerset County?
Do you know where I don't know how long they've been doing this. I imagine a long time, but they have the hunt horse races. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh man, yes. Is that on the way, sort of off Route 22, um, like past the circle? I'm trying to think what direction to be heading more towards, like, but man,
It's between 78 and 287,
yep.
that area. So, and no one really knows it other than the hunt. But right, I could basically throw a baseball there.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I went to Bridgewater Raritan High School and middle school. I was in Freehold, New Jersey for a couple of years before that because Lucent had a big headquarters in Homedale, New Jersey. And my dad had gone from AT&T or Bell Labs AT&T to Lucent. So crazy, small world, to say the least. But yeah, I think for so the first wearable I tried, probably like a lot of people, might have been the Nike Fuel Band. I can't remember if it was that or Fitbit or the timing exactly of it. So I think in college, so my senior design project was an accelerometer, and so we created sort of we were actually looking on just the chip level, and our idea was like, oh, let's track movement of shipping boxes. This is how sophisticated we were, or unclever we were in college. But we're like, oh, you'll be able to track if you put an accelerometer on all these boxes. That if someone drops your FedEx box and something breaks, you can, that would be great for the consumer. So that was like, I think my first idea back in 2005 with our group when we were making accelerometer. And then lo and behold, I think, yeah, a couple years later, right, Fitbit has put accelerometers in, essentially a step counter on a wrist-based device. And I think, yeah, so I probably had tried a pedometer. It might have been the original Fitbit pedometer. And then at some point, I feel like really, though, it was the first Nike Fuel Band that like I got obsessed with. And really just because I thought, it was easier to join with friends, easier to get people being active, and just had a lot of fun. I think the marketing was terrific. And I think that though died off really quick, like it did for many people, like was pretty much a fad. And you start asking yourself, wait, what are these fuel points? What does this mean? I think, I ended up probably sticking with 2 or 3 Fitbits, all the different variants. I think I tried 2 Jawbones, probably like Jawbones and Basis Watch the most, but I kept having a hard time with the straps breaking and then, eventually Basis Watch being recalled. I did try the Zero, for those out there who don't know, the Zero is like a, not around anymore, but essentially was like at home, PSG EEG device that tracks sleep, but it was really uncomfortable. So, I didn't really use that much. So I think, yeah, I probably tried two Basis, maybe 3 Fitbits, the Fuel Band, 2 Jawbones before Oura. And I would say majority of those devices, right, were all focused on activity. I think Fitbit, Jawbone was probably, and Jawbone and Basis had sleep. They didn't have it till the later models. And, I think both were pretty early days for, sleep staging and things like that, not that accurate. It was really, really early days of that. Fitbit didn't, they didn't probably roll out sleep staging or, sleep, I want to say till like 2017. Can't remember exactly, 2018 maybe. So I think, most of all these other devices were really focused on activity, your heart rate in your workout, your resting heart rate, things like that, or your steps and activity burn. And, I think when I used Oura, my revelation even before was, hey, my heart rate during my workout, it's already too late to adjust my workout. I used to plan my workout out, have a program for the week or the month or, a couple months at a time. And, started to realize, well, like looking at my heart rate and my workout, if it's too high or too low, I'm either not pushing myself too much or too little. And I think it's too late. You've already planned your workout. And so what I started to realize that with Oura was like, oh, wow, seeing how I sleep and recovered and things like heart rate variability as well, before you get to the gym, you can sort of tell how you're going to perform, right? And then you can plan your workout or different, not a workout accordingly, right? So I think the idea of sort of being, preventative or, helping you plan before versus being reactive and too late after. And so I think that's when I really was like, holy cow, this is making a ton of sense. Days I had better heart rate variability, better deep sleep, I would push myself harder in the gym and able to get that, drive that correlation with like, that's making, a better performance in a short time. And then, simultaneously, I also, like other people, tracked a lot of stuff in spreadsheets. So I used to track, okay, how many hours did I actually spend working each day, on the project, on things on my to-do list. And I just started realizing, like, I was more efficient. I was getting things done faster. I was able to write emails quicker. I was less distracted on nights that I slept better, and, and recovered better. And then, I think qualitatively, I realized I was cracking more jokes, like being a better, better boyfriend, a better dog owner. And so I think, like, all those things, even though I knew some of the science before, sleep was probably that missing link. And once I started to improve that, everything sort of improved. So I think that's really why, to me, it was like, oh, this is more important, more preventative, versus, something that's reactive. And it's too late. Like, if your workout sucks, that in the middle of the workout, we all know that feeling. Everyone hates that feeling. What if you can know that before? And I think that's what really did it for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's like the way I think about sleep, and I've just started to really appreciate. I've thought about it, and the importance of it for a few years, but really just started to appreciate it within the last several months. I actually came from like the opposite perspective when I remember I was a senior in college. I was thinking one day, I was like, if I just cut if I sleep 8 hours a night and I cut it to 6, I actually get back, 2 hours a day. And that's a pretty significant amount on top of like
Yeah.
a 16-hour day. And I was like, I can increase my life by so and so percent. So I actually had like kind of the opposite perspective. And it's hard to qualitatively know, like if you're like me, like sometimes you trust the way you feel, but sometimes you also trust the data. And it sounds like you're kind of the same perspective. So it's very helpful. It's been very helpful over the last few months for me to be using Oura. And on the one hand, I wake up and it tells me I have a really good sleep score or a really good readiness score, and I have kind of extra confidence. I know how much I slept, and I had a good night's sleep, and I've been having a good week's sleep. And then I can feel really confident, like going into my day, going into my workouts. I can feel confident pushing a little bit, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of curious your perspective on this kind of almost like a psychological thing, which is that when I see, so as an example, transparently, last night I got an awful night's sleep. I was up till 1 a.m. and only slept till like 7. And of those 6 hours, I slept like 4.5 or 5.
Okay.
And frankly, like I realized that actually my podcast, the podcasts tend to go better when I have more sleep. So hopefully that's not an indicator today, but I think it's funny anyways. And I look at the scores when they're bad, and I kind of say, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to actually just listen to like my body a little bit today and see how I feel, and be aware that if I do feel tired, like I kind of know why. But if I don't, I'm not going to sweat it. So it's like this positive mindset applied to these objective measurements that has made it really useful for me personally. Is that something that you've thought about at all?
Yeah, no, a ton. I mean, there's a couple ways I've thought about it, and maybe just experienced it in my life. You know, and maybe also getting back to this, to what you were talking about earlier, like I definitely thought the same in the beginning. Like, oh yeah, I'll get 6 hours of sleep, and I'll get 2 hours more in my workday. I'll get 2 hours more done. I'll have an extra 15 minutes to stretch after my workout or foam roll that I never get. So I definitely thought the exact same way, that, oh, that's what'll make me more productive. I'll cut this area. And by the way, I think most of us who are type, driven professionally, right, and want to have balanced lives, I think we work hard and work out hard, right? And I think, and we tend to cut it from sleep, and we want to have a great social life too, right? I think that's what all humans want, right? We want it all. And I think, I used to do the same, and I think that's when I started to hit a plateau myself physically. So like, after doing all the if diets and keto stuff, like I was able to lose like 60 pounds, and but then eventually I hit a plateau, and I'm still in my mid 20s, but I was like, man, why am I not making any progress? And I think that's the part that was sort of eye-opening for me, is like, actually I can start to make more progress by prioritizing this and breaking past my plateaus. And it meant working smarter, not harder. Maybe the other way I thought about it, relating back to sort of banking and finance a bit, and investing, is, right, there's leading economic indicators and lagging economic indicators, right? LEIs, as they're called, right? And so, sleep was actually my leading economic indicator on how I was going to perform, versus my heart rate and my workout after. Oh, it's my lagging indicator. It's already too late. I could have told you that before. And so I think that was also something that drove my mindset. But to your last question on what do you do on days that the data is bad? I think unfortunately humans, right, we tend to get very focused and very competitive on certain areas. I think you can see this with people that have fantasy football. There's some people that obsess about it. It's like the most important thing to them right now, right? During football season, right? And you can totally obsess about your roster all the time. Same thing with stock prices. Stocks go down, just like my data on my Oura Ring goes down certain days, right? And then I think it's like, well, okay, so what are you going to do? You can sit there and get nervous and worry about all the data or beat yourself up about it. Or yeah, to your point, hey, take the positive mindset of like, okay, I'm a little bit more aware now, so maybe I can do things a little bit better today. All right, I had a crappy, I had a crappy night of sleep too last night, right? Got 6.5 hours instead of normally 7.5. And my heart rate and HRV, my heart rate was higher, HRV was lower than average. Okay, so what am I going to do about it today? All right, I'll try to get an extra walk in outside just to relax a bit. I'll try to meditate 5 minutes between a meeting, right? I think for me, I'd see myself, all right, I'll cancel meetings because I know it's going to be unproductive and I'm going to be in a bad mood and I'm going to be stressed. So I think, even if the data is bad, it just makes you a little bit more aware. And so I think, awareness is really the first step, I think, of change. And I think even if things are bad, that's fine. Now you're a little bit more aware and informed. So what are you going to do? So I think, we used to have this saying at Eminence, at the hedge fund I worked at, like, even if you strike out, you still got to keep, swinging the bat. Like you can't let things in the red hurt you psychologically so that you don't swing the bat or don't play the game anymore. And so I think that's the same for any type of data that you look at. It's orthosomnia is a thing. There are certain types of people who will get so obsessed about it, but I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's just another point of awareness that leads you to make better decisions that day.
Yeah, I think to try to summarize like what you just said, the way that I think about Aura is that it's it's passive measurement. I just wear this thing I wear the ring on my finger and I never have to think about it. I charge it when I shower and literally it's like couldn't be easier. And then I wake up and I check the app, at my leisure. And so it's like this passive measurement leads to more active management where on a good day, I don't really have to do a whole lot. I can just have like a whole lot of confidence knowing that I had a really good night's sleep. And then on the bad days, like you said, there's certain levers that you can pull, whether it's, rescheduling meetings or going for a walk or eating a little better or taking a nap that can sort of remedy the situation a little bit. So before we get too deep into like the different aspects of Aura, and I want to go back to your story in some regards as well, but can we just introduce for people who aren't as familiar as I obviously have the ring and so I'm pretty familiar, but for people who don't know, can you kind of introduce the Oura Ring however you like to do that?
Yeah, sure. So Oura Ring, where it's a wearable ring, but I think we really, our aim, the way we talk about our company internally, right? Our mission is to empower people to own their potential, and I think potential, human potential it can be sort of, you know, thought of in a simpler way of like we want people to be the best version of themselves. So when I was a hedge fund analyst, I want that version of Harpreet to be more effective and productive. When I'm a boyfriend, I want to be more empathetic, more caring, more fun to be around, right? And so I think our view is health is a way to have people to have the best versions of themselves, better health. And I think we felt like starting with sleep is really a key thing. Now we do track activity and steps, but I think for all the reasons we were talking about earlier, people understanding sleep and the recovery, right? That's probably going to have the single biggest impact on how you perform and feel in any given single day. And, we should have people sort of focused on that. It's unfortunate now that, Jake, like you and me, half of Americans on any given night, 50% of Americans, more than 50% are getting less than 6 hours of sleep. That has a huge impact on how we feel and perform. And I think our view is that if we can help people start there on that health journey, that's going to be the foundation where then, okay, you're going to make better decisions about eating. You're going to make better decisions about what activities you should do or shouldn't do, or knowing that you're stressed, just being a little bit more aware so you're not as aggressive or grumpy in a meeting. And so I think, whether it's, mental health, physical health, right, dietary health, right, starting with sleep as our cornerstone of our product, and really our user journey, I think is so important and so helpful. So we give, we have wearable ring, the battery lasts 6 nights, and we have a bunch of different sensors on there, but we give users 3 scores: a sleep score, an activity score, and something that we call a readiness score. A readiness score is just a cumulative understanding of your personal data adjusted to your personal baseline. And then we also look at, your 2-week average of sleep and activity, along with your prior night and prior day of sleep and activity, along with some other physiological characteristics like changes in your respiratory rate, heart rate variability, and temperature. And then we come up with a sort of cumulative score, which we, call the readiness score. And I think what people tell us all the time is, man, my readiness score is how I feel today. And so I think that's how we've sort of shown people this data, both on a 1 night basis, so you can look at your sleep and your steps and all that stuff, but actually on a more cumulative basis, so you really understand your health and how you're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear the feedback on the readiness score. I really like that piece as well. Like I mentioned last night, didn't get a good sleep score at all, but my readiness score was like in the 70s, which is not bad, at least for what I've done since I got the ring. And I think the text below it actually said something as straightforward as like, you didn't sleep very well last night, but you're still ready. Don't worry about it. And
Yeah.
it's like nice to see, had I just had the sleep score, I might get in a hole and, mentally of thinking like, oh, it's, going to be a bad day or whatever it is. But it's nice to have that readiness score, which is based on, more than just your last night's sleep, and takes, I guess, like a longer term view and a more considerate, set of measurements from not just the night before, but, several nights or whatever it might be. One thing that you talked about was, the Oura Ring. Obviously you're trying to help people fulfill their potential, and so there's this sort of quality of life that comes to mind for me. And like I mentioned earlier, and you talked about it, how people aren't getting enough sleep. 50%, I think you said, are sleeping less than 6 hours. I remember I read Matthew Walker's book recently, Why We Sleep. Highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in the subject. And he talks about how just 100 years ago, I think it was, that number was like closer to 2% for adults in America. So it's this new phenomenon where people are, there's this work hard, play hard, whatever you want to call it. People aren't sleeping enough as a result of it. And it could be screen time or something like that as well, I want to talk about. But I think what's interesting, going back to our conversation earlier about like, that mindset, it's actually not just about like quantity of the amount of hours that you have in your days or weeks or life. It's also about, the quality of it, right?
Yeah, it's so funny. We're having this conversation yesterday internally with parts of our team about quality of life. I think people on this podcast, listening to this podcast, probably know that and have heard that. I think sometimes though, to probably reach the masses, I think we found that potential, can probably communicate it more, right? That and what does potential mean, right? I can tell you, when I was 18 years old or I should say 15 to 18, potential to me meant my physical performance. Like straight up, I want to start on the varsity soccer team at, as Bridgewater Raritan, probably now has 3,000 kids in that high school, right? Like that was a hard thing to do because I was, like I said, I worked twice as hard to be half as good. And so for me, that was at that point in my life what potential meant. After scoring a goal in a game and realizing I was never going to be pro at soccer, but I was going to be pro in something else. For me, when I graduated college, potential was, hey, at a hedge fund, at a competitive hedge fund, right? That you're trying to outperform your other peers in the stock market, right? Like, to me, potential meant, hey, I need to outthink and connect the dots faster in meetings and looking at data than other people. And to me, that was potential. And I think right now, potential for me is like, man, or we have now 200 people at our company. I need to be a better leader. I need to be more empathetic. I need to be able to guide and coach, right, and do a better job of that for my team. And so to me, that's potential right now. And so I think, quality of life is something that I do think, has been around this concept for the last 10 plus years, right? It's not just the years, right? It's the life in the years. And I think that is the right concept and wording. I think I found it hard for people to understand that from a mass level. Like if I talk about that with, my mom or dad, the concept's there, but if I explain to my mom, like, mom, right now you want to be the best grandparent you can be, or future grandparent. Putting no pressure on myself or my sister with that statement. But, I think, that's what she wants to be. She wants to be the best caretaker for the rest of my family, right? She wants to be around to see all those things, right? So quality of life for her may mean longevity right now. But I think it's really finding sort of like connecting what is your why, what are your goals, what is your why at this moment in life, what's most important to you, and then how can better health deliver that. And so I think that's how we've thought about it more internally than just quality of life. But I love those words too. I just fear that not everyone can resonate with that as much as people that have been looking at the healthcare space as we have in the last few years.
Yeah, totally get that, and makes a lot of sense. And obviously, the potential performance, whatever anyone individually wants to think of it as, there's something to be said for, I guess, the improvement. Regardless of the time, the improvement in performance, potential, quality, whatever you want to call it, per time, rather than simply, oh, you're less likely to die of heart disease or cancer if you sleep more.
Yeah.
The impact in the present is as or maybe more meaningful even than in the long term. That's at least how kind of I've come
It's
to.
actually really, I think that's a really good behavior change question, right? I think certain people will react to a reward more in the present, right? And an example, right? When I worked at a hedge fund, my compensation was directly tied to performance of stocks that I chose, right? So that my incentive, I was being incentivized in the present to maximize performance there, right? I think that that is something that sometimes can drive more positive behavior than, hey, Harpreet, all four grandparents of yours, true story, unfortunately, have had heart attack or stroke or died from them. That is something that is going to likely happen to you based on your family genetics, right? Unfortunately, I think it probably would have been even harder for me to be that motivated, in my mid 20s about something that may or may not happen when I'm 50 or 60 or 70. So I think it's sometimes human behavior just reacts to, what's in front of them and more certain than what could happen and, uncertain, even if it's more severe. Obviously, me having a heart attack when I'm 50 would be much more severe than, hey, was my portfolio up 15% versus 20%? But most people's behaviors from a behavioral psychology and change perspective don't necessarily think that way. And I think that's what makes our healthcare system, at least in the US, so hard right now. And why, we're at whatever it is, great. Well, this year, of course, greater than, 20% of GDP because of COVID, but, 20% of GDP growing double digit, it's almost an unsustainable cost for healthcare in the US. And so I think, and that's partly because, people think about healthcare as sick care today, right? Like I get sick, that's when I go see the doctor. I have a heart attack, that's when I go to the hospital, right? Not before. Because I think before it's like most people don't think about that as something, don't have a reward structure in their heads that can sort of simplify, hey, this may or may not happen. I need to make these changes now. And those changes, that may or may not could be so severe. I think sometimes it's just hard to get people's behavior to change, their psychology to really appreciate that, unless they understand the consequences more. And I think that's part of it too, right? We just got to make people understand how, like Matthew Walker has done so brilliantly, like, hey, how lack of sleep will lead to likely higher rates of cancer or Alzheimer, right? Whatever it may, Alzheimer's and dementia, whatever it may be. I think we need more and more of that research so people understand the long-term consequences. But yeah, in the short term, I think we've seen people, if you can sort of get something they care about now, will most likely react to that faster, quicker, and change their behavior than something that may or may not happen 10, 20, 50 years from now.
Yeah, I totally agree. The short term incentives, like as much as I try to take a long term view, because I know that, or at least I believe that there's value to doing so and advantage to doing so. I think that all humans with now all constant feed of information on your phone and whatever it is, all these different forms of entertainment, everyone's attention span and outlook is kind of becoming closer and closer and shorter and shorter term, more
Yeah.
focused on the near term and the stuff that you can actually see and feel today or tomorrow or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So
Look,
I think it's powerful.
I think it's something that it's such a hard concept and it's not just health, right? It's the other one is economics, right? If you look at Warren Buffett and everything he talks about, the law of compound math, right? If you let something compound, right, for 20 to 30 years at 5 to 7 or 10%, it can be a life-changing, if you save $1,000 every year and keep contributing, that can be multiples, right? 30 to 50 years from now than you'll ever think of. Yet most people will instead spend that $1,000 now on something that they want now, and not be willing to sacrifice that immediate return for something that could be much bigger later down the road. And so I think, we see it in our health, we see it in, our long-term finances as well. And I think it's just a hard thing to make a sacrifice now for something that may or may not be certain in the future. But hopefully, again, more education, more people talking about that. I think we've seen that in health. We're seeing it in the finance sector. Companies like Robinhood getting out there and helping people learn about investing, at a younger and younger age, I think is great. So hopefully we see more education, more awareness that happens in all these spaces, so people can make the better decision in the short term for the long term.
Right. So it starts with education and understanding and awareness. Once having like an Oura Ring and actually being able to see and measure the information. Once you have the information and you have the education and understanding that you've decided you're going to prioritize sleep some more, what are some of the biggest weapons to create to optimize not only sleep time, which is partly obviously a choice of just like when you go to bed and when you wake up, but also your efficiency during that time, your ability to sleep, your REM sleep, your deep sleep, etc. What I'm curious, kind of from two angles. One, what have you gotten back from the users, and two, and obviously there might be some overlap, but what have you applied in your own life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably some of the easiest weapons, but probably most ununderstood or not well understood by people is just timing. And that I mean it as timing and consistency of sleep, and not just sleep, but everything you do. So when you have your last cup of coffee, if you have a cup of coffee at 2 p.m., right, versus 10 a.m., that can have a tremendous impact given the half-life of caffeine and that decay curve on how much caffeine's in your system when you go to bed at 9 or at 10, 11, or 12 p.m. And so I think, that's really interesting. Just and same thing with food. I think we see it with people that, end up eating and finishing dinner 4 hours before they sleep versus 2 hours before they sleep. Much better deep sleep, much, lower resting heart rates, much higher heart rate variabilities, much better readiness scores, and they feel and perform better the next day. So I think, timing of food, of caffeine, even if you're going to drink responsibly, be a happy hour versus a nightcap type of person. And, I think you'll see much better data on your sleep, and how you feel and perform the next day. So I think, those, I would say timing of food, consistency of timing of sleep. If you just, Matthew Walker talks about this, right? Like during daylight savings, right? I forget what percent of increase in heart attacks, but it's, the next day we see, right? It's like something like over a 25. I think it's something as high as like a 50% increase. I wish I remember that one, or off the top of my head right now, on the day following, daylight savings change, because people's sleep patterns got shifted by that much. And that has a tremendous impact on our cardiac health. And most people don't know that. So just being consistent in when you go to sleep will improve the quality of it. Same thing when you wake up. Same thing when you eat food, when you exercise, and when you have coffee and or alcohol. So I think learning that, just those daily choices we all make, most people that are probably listening to this podcast are going to eat today, going to drink coffee today, may or may not drink alcohol, and probably will want to work out today. And so I think timing is such an interesting thing in how the human body works in hormonal cycles. I think some of the other really interesting hacks out there are probably, I do think blue light blocking glasses for, 2/3 of people has a tremendous impact. We all are working later, we're, looking at Netflix later, we're more connected now than ever. And so I think that can have a pretty immediate impact on the quality of your sleep. I'm
Do
trying
you
to think
think,
what else.
just to jump in there, because I'm curious, I don't know if there's any way for me to find this, maybe you guys have or will, but I'm curious the correlation between screen time and maybe particularly phone screen time, but overall screen time and sleep efficiency. Have you found that, and maybe you don't have this specific of data, but the blue light glasses, do they like completely negate the adverse impact, do you think, of like being on your phone late at night for a couple hours before you sleep? or is it kind of a
Yeah.
marginal help?
No, I mean, I definitely think they help, especially if you're going to get into some of those activities, right? Like if you're going to watch The Queen's Gambit and watch 3 episodes in one night instead of one. I
I'm
definitely
I'm
think,
in the middle of that right now. It's pretty funny.
as apparently so are 60 million other Netflix watchers, some crazy number have already watched it already, which is awesome. I loved it. But I think if you are going to do those things, yeah, late at night, like when I do work, in the evenings or at night, I do use my blue light blockers. I think it helps. It would still help better if I didn't work or do, some of that stuff regardless, right? So I think if you're going to do it, maybe just being a little bit more aware and a little bit, more responsible when you do it, so you can still get some things done more effectively the next day. So I would say, yeah, don't have the data on the difference of using your phone, blue light blockers, using your phone, and not using your phone. That would be a pretty cool data set. But hopefully one day, we can drive those kind of correlations for users. But unfortunately, not there yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys are going pretty fast, all things considered. I think it sounds like was it 2016 you said you discovered Aura in the first place?
Yeah, our first rings from the Kickstarter of our Gen 1. Now we're on our Gen 2 devices. Most people don't know or didn't hear of us when we had Gen 1. So I think, yeah, Gen 1, started shipping, or it was announced on a Kickstarter at the end of 15, started shipping early 16. And then Gen 2, really didn't start shipping in earnest till late 2018. Um, so I think, and even then we had a backlog for, several months for about a year. So I think more people are hearing about us now as we've just grown and been able to increase our manufacturing and production. And so now people get it like a normal e-commerce product, in a week. And yeah, luckily, we've been growing pretty fast.
Yeah, it's great, and I'm excited to see. Obviously, I still think of myself as relatively early adopter, and I'm excited to see what's in the future for you guys. One interesting development is this year you had a pretty popular in the media partnership with the NBA. Also, I understand with WNBA, a number of other organizations in sports and otherwise. Can you talk a bit about how COVID has shifted or pivoted your guys' roadmap at all? Maybe just accelerated what you were already planning on doing?
Yeah. No, I think I think it's changed the market for all of us in this space, and frankly, everyone's lives, unfortunately. So I think, we have been investing in research, with universities every single year. And, I think when we were planning to do some of that this year, obviously during a pandemic, during the lockdown, basic research was sort of, suspended everywhere in the US when COVID started. Can't recruit subjects, right, in a lockdown. And I think, we have seen, though, every single year, during the flu season, people reach out to us on social, reach out to us, via CX and emails and stuff. And they're like, wow, you won't believe it. My readiness scores, were changing a day or two before I felt sick. We've heard that every flu season for the last 4 years. And I think, this year that just took on such a bigger meaning. And so, we had a user who came out really publicly and said, I've had an Oura Ring for a year. He was a really strong recreational athlete. He's a skier. And his name is Petri Holman in Finland. And he was like, look, I've had this product for a year. My readiness score is always in the 80s or 90s. I know me and you are jealous of him. But he's like, I woke up one day in early March, my readiness score was a 54. My Oura Ring said my temperature was up about a degree. He's like, I didn't feel any symptoms, but my heart rate was elevated, my HRV was down, my respiratory rate was up, I believe. And he decided to go get checked for COVID. Described himself as asymptomatic, and it turns out he was positive. And so I think that happened in early March. We were already hearing it from other users, but this user just described his journey publicly. And I think at that time too, plus with other research plans being canceled, we felt like we had to do what we can to help during the pandemic. And for us, I think from an epidemiology perspective, a pandemic, we haven't been in a pandemic in the past where we've had all this new technology that we've had over the last 50 years, right? So I think in order to prevent future pandemics, let's try to collect as much information as we can. Let's try to learn about, this virus and other influenza-like illnesses. And so, we decided to donate, we kick off a study, with UCSF. I think we were the first wearable to launch a study before Apple, before Fitbit, before Whoop, before Garmin and others, on COVID. And we to start that study donated 2,000 Oura Rings to frontline healthcare workers that were going to be in COVID wards across the country, because they're likely to get sick, unfortunately. And then we had another donor come in and donate another 1,000 rings. And then I think we opened this study up to all of our users in the Oura database. And so we've had nearly 70,000 people enroll in that study. And pretty early, we've started to see really, really interesting things in the data indicating, people can see changes in their Oura data up to 3 days in advance of feeling symptoms. The final study is yet still to be, published, but those things always take time. But we're really excited about the data. I think the NBA heard about that study, knew that we had temperature sensors in the Oura Ring, and other wrist-based wearables didn't have that. And I think also did a lot of research, talking to other researchers, not just at UCSF, but other universities, and felt like in a bubble, that they're trying to be as safe as they can, right? No one's a pro in operating in a pandemic, and the NBA was the first sports league to go back to work, basically, and into a playoff. At least I think UFC and NASCAR and some of the car racing, or UFC and NASCAR, I believe, might have been actually even earlier to go back. But I think when they're trying to do that, they're trying to keep everyone as safe as they can. 2,000 plus people in a bubble. They felt like, hey, having this technology can only help people understand their bodies more, be a little bit more self-aware. Come to us if they see a problem, and give everyone a little bit more peace of mind. And so, luckily, I'd say great research has turned into some great partnerships, and for us as a company, and never really would have thought that would have happened this year.
Yeah, I think the NBA, stamp of approval is certainly a big thing. I view them pretty, admirably in the way that they've dealt with everything. They, as far as I remember, like they were the first league to actually shut down before they were the first league to
Correct.
come back.
Yeah.
And I think Adam Silver's done a tremendous job with everything, doing everything really responsibly, safe, but making sure everyone can continue. And it is important for a lot of people to have sports to watch, whether you can argue against that or not, but I think it does, some people do look forward to that, and it is a meaningful thing to get sports back. And you guys were obviously a huge part of that. So, and I do think that the future also of diagnosing, whether it's, COVID or the flu or whatever it might be, having earlier diagnoses of these things through advanced, wearables or whatever it might be, just helps to drive towards more preventative medicine, and it's certainly something that I'm pretty excited about. I want to end with a final question. Obviously, like you were thinking a lot about sleep in the early days. You also were thinking about exercise and diet and everything like that. Curious where you are today in terms of like your overall picture of health. Obviously, sleep is at near the top of what's important to you and what you pay a lot of attention to and prioritize. But is there any other things that you kind of, swear by and live by and always turn to if, you're feeling like you don't have the energy or you're not taking care of yourself?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think for me lately, one of the other hacks and things I've been doing, is the sauna. I think there's a lot of great research out there. Rhonda Patrick's put out a bunch, and other researchers have studied this too, right? But just there's definitely something that's at another level of recovery and restore and rejuvenation with the sauna than than I think most people know about. So I think I found that to be tremendously helpful myself lately. But I'd say exercising for me has always been sort of a little bit of my outlet. Just getting that going, even if it doesn't need to be hard. And I think that's the other thing that's changed a lot with my understanding, right? Is that sometimes a light workout, actually a lot of times, will be more beneficial for you than a hard workout. And so I think that's an area, I think, like me personally, that I've always just found comfort in a little bit of my time and my focus time, just to get away from it all. I think as a company, frankly, wearables probably, I sort of talk about wearables start out as like 1.0, and that was really steps and activity. And I think where wearables are now going, is to health as a whole. Right? Oh, I can tell I'm getting sick before I feel that because of my wearable. Oh, I can tell what days are better to work out before I start the workout because of wearable. I think we're doing some interesting stuff in women's health, and I would love, for our aim to eventually be like, oh, I can tell when my cycle is going to happen before I feel it, right? And, women can plan their days and their lives better. And I think, if you start to look at all these other applications out there, we're seeing Apple has done a tremendous job on AFib, particularly, in that aspect of cardiac health. Samsung is doing a lot of interesting work with hypertension and blood pressure in Korea. I think Fitbit, is doing work as is Withings on sleep apnea. And now Apple doing that too. So I think the way the wearables world is going is more to, not just from activity and or sleep, like a point solution, but to a more holistic picture of your health, right? And moving towards health as a whole, not just one or two things or categories. But I think, look, for us as a company, sleep we think is the right foundation, but we want our users to be able to make better choices all throughout the day. To eat better, to meditate more, right? To exercise more, right? And or exercise, how much they should be exercising. So I think if we if we start with that positive behavior change with sleep, it'll make all those things easier. And then I do think the long-term, health applications, health sensing applications, as most would traditionally call medical applications, are really interesting. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. But as far as me personally, the other thing I've been doing lately is the sauna, and it's been a game changer.
That's great. Well, I appreciate the perspective. I know we're coming up on time, so I want to wrap things up. But can't stress enough for those tuning in who don't have an Oura Ring yet. I'm a pretty hardcore minimalist. Like I don't have a lot of products. I don't like a lot of products, but the Oura Ring, since I got it, has just been awesome, and can't imagine going back to a world without it. And that's just my personal opinion, but it's true. So Harpreet, I appreciate you coming on today, obviously, to talk about all this stuff, and it's been really interesting to hear your perspective. And think I'm confident in Oura going forward with you at the helm. So wish you guys all the best. And wrapping up, would love to hear where you would send people to just learn more about you or the company or whatever else it might be.
Yeah, luckily we got a website, and it's just ouraring.com. That's OURARING.com. And you can, check us out there. We have a great blog called The Pulse, where, we showcase a lot of users, how they've improved their lives and other things in some of the science, and health aspects if you want to go deeper there. But definitely give us a a shout and check out there. I will also say, Jake, just thanks a ton for having me on. Frankly, I think, like we talked about, a lot of this is education awareness, and it's people like you that are just, making others aware, right? Your listeners aware that, hey, there's things you can do to improve the state that you're in. So thanks for having me on, and really appreciate what you're doing as well.